Welcome back. Well, the fallout from last week's global cyber attack appears to be less than expected. On Friday, computers in at least 150 countries displayed this screen, which tells users all their data is locked up and they have to pay to have it unlocked. Efforts to halt the so-called ransomware appear to be working, according to law enforcement agencies around the world, but experts warn it is still a threat. Samuel Burke joins us now from London to explain all of this. Samuel, more than 200,000 victims after the first day, but many people were already off their computers for the weekend. What happened when they returned to work Monday? Has it spread further?
Well, Lynda, they've been able to stop the spread of this virus, but the claws of it are really still sinking in today. Remember, the news broke on Friday in the U.S. By that time, people in China were already at home, so they returned to work today and are seeing messages demanding the $300 in Bitcoin, this ransom really, so they can get their files back. Also, you have new strains of this virus. Maybe they're copycats or the same group has changed the code a bit, so we're seeing other versions of this virus going around now, though not as large a scale, thankfully. And here in the UK, 7 hospitals and clinics are still affected. Their files frozen, so they can't get fully back to work. And it's amazing to think that this is all the result of really a hole, vulnerability in Windows. And all you had to do was update your system. You know those annoying pop-ups you get in the lower right-hand corner of your screen, Lynda, and you probably say, oh, I'll restart my computer tomorrow. If you haven't done one of those since March and you're using Windows, you are vulnerable to this, so update immediately.
Yeah, incredible to think it's just over installing an update. Microsoft, of course, is pointing the finger at the US government agency. Just explain why.
This is incredible because usually you don't have these type of arguments going on in public between a tech company and a government like the United States. But what Microsoft is saying is that this was a tool that was used by the NSA, one would hope, so that they can get into computers and find maybe terrorist data. But then it was either leaked or stolen from the NSA and it got into the wrong hands. But take a look at just how blatant Microsoft is being about this. Usually there are pleasantries, but they said in a blog post, quote, we have seen vulnerabilities stored by the CIA show up on WikiLeaks, and now this vulnerability stolen from the NSA has affected customers around the world. An equivalent scenario with conventional weapons would be the U.S. military having some of its Tomahawk missiles stolen. So that is the analogy that Microsoft is using, and they're very clearly blaming the NSA here.
Yeah, incredible statement. All right, Samuel Burke, great to have you with us. Thank you. We're going to talk a bit more about this. Fears may be easing, but the threat has not gone. Let's have a look at the next steps in stopping the cyber attack and protecting our data from future attacks. We're joined now by Professor Mark Skilton, a digital expert from Warick Business School. Good to have you with us.
Hello.
The world hasn't seen an attack of this magnitude. Just explain what makes it so bad and how it worked.
Well, this is what I call a zero-day attack. In fact, you have 0 days or 0 time to actually respond to it. And the irony, of course, is that Microsoft actually published a patch for this back in March. As your previous interview said, that the old Windows XP systems that hadn't been patched were clearly vulnerable, and there's over 11 million of those around the world. So this is really the issue at stake, is we need to defend ourselves against potentially very serious threats like ransomware.
So we know at least 200,000 people received this kind of statement that popped up on their computer asking to be paid to get their data back. How many people actually handed over money, and did they get their data back?
Well, unless you've backed it up on another computer which is not connected, then it's very likely you have lost your data. But I think one of the things, certainly in the UK, with the National Cybersecurity Agency, what I heard, is that normally with most ransomware, there may be a fix for it. So instead of just assuming that you've got to pay the $300, you want to double check online. You might want to contact the National Cybersecurity Agency, or over in the United States, some agency. And I think one of the challenges that this is showing is that it's a bit like the emergency services. When you want the police or the ambulance or the fire brigade or the fire service, we now need to have an emergency service, I would argue, for cybersecurity. Who's going to fund this? Who's going to run this? I don't personally think it's just up to Microsoft to police its own system, and I don't think that's what they're saying. I think what's needed is a concerted effort across governments and also nationally, so that you have a kind of response unit like an emergency service now.
I heard one analyst say those affected had bad digital hygiene. So basically it was up to the businesses or up to the customers. In this case, does it seem like businesses were the main target as opposed to personal computers?
Well, yes. I mean, obviously those poor people in the National Health Service and also in other places is really the target. You are vulnerable. Your personal data, corporate information, patient records is now the choice of criminals to blackmail or to steal. And I think this is really the area that we're in. We've got to understand the value of data. We have got to understand the value of our privacy. We've got to protect it, because if we don't, we're going to lose it. And I think, if anything, the lesson learned from this is that we're not doing enough. We need to be investing. If those customers, not blaming them or Microsoft, is that we need a proper way of protecting ourselves. If you buy a car, you expect to have brakes. If you're putting your money in a bank, you expect them to look after it. You've now got to have the same type of diligence and monitoring going on now with personal data.